She can't be the doctor." The voice cut through the ER hallway like a cold slap. "Room 214. Woman in her late 70s, pale, wheezing, clutching her side in pain, but still loud enough to make every nurse turn." Dr. Simone Harris stood at the foot of the bed, clipboard in hand. Calm. Professional. She didn't even flinch. The patient looked her up and down, the skin, the braids, the name tag. No offense, but I'd feel more comfortable with someone more experienced. Someone who looks like they went to medical school. The nurse next to her froze. Simone didn't respond, just made a quiet note on the chart. "Is there someone else?" The woman pressed. "I don't want to be a diversity case." Simone finally looked up. Her tone? Even. Her eyes? Sharp. "I'll step out." And she did. No argument. No performance. But on the way out, she stopped at the nurse's station. Tapped the chart once. "You'll want to flag this one for infectious disease. Rare markers. If I'm right, they won't spot it in time." She didn't say more. Didn't need to. Because 10 hours later, after every other attending got it wrong, the patient's vitals crashed, and suddenly everyone was paging one name. Dr. Simone Harris. Ever been dismissed before you even spoke? Like if someone's ever judged your worth by your face. Share this, because this time, silence doesn't win. The alarm rang at 4:30 a.m. Not because she had to, because she chose to. Dr. Simone Harris didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. Not on paper. She had the MD, the PhD, the fellowship from Johns Hopkins. She was board certified in internal medicine and infectious diseases, had published 8 peer-reviewed articles, taught as a guest lecturer at 3 universities, and still, every day, she arrived before sunrise. She pulled her braids into a bun, slipped on compression socks, then her white coat, the name Harris MD stitched in gold. The coat still had a tiny coffee stain near the hem. She never cleaned it off. It reminded her of the 36-hour shift that nearly broke her, and didn't. She passed the mirror without pausing, not because she didn't care, but because she already knew who was staring back. Not what the world saw, what she built. The hospital parking lot was half empty when she pulled in. She parked in the far corner, not because it was a sign, because she liked to walk, to feel the ground before she faced the weight of the day. Inside, the world was already ticking. Machines humming, codes being called, nurses scanning wristbands. Simone greeted everyone by name. "Morning, Darla." "Jared, you look tired. You sleep last night." "Deshawn, your mother's test came back. It's good news." She never raised her voice, never rushed, but people moved when she walked past, not out of fear, out of certainty. By 6 a.m., she was reviewing her rounds. 10 cases, 2 discharges, 1 unsolvable. That one, patient 214, hadn't been officially assigned yet, just admitted overnight. Severe fatigue, intermittent fever, shortness of breath, no diagnosis, no matches on standard profiles, rapid deterioration. She flagged it immediately. Rare, unstable, pattern familiar, deeply familiar. Something most doctors would mislabel as pneumonia or nervous system fatigue. But Simone had seen this before. In a refugee clinic during her international work in Lagos. In an ER in Queens, buried in the middle of a COVID wave. Once in a rural lab in Mississippi, where 2 patients died before anyone knew what they were looking at. She read the blood work again. And again. This was her domain. So she stood, adjusted her coat, and headed toward room 214. She didn't expect applause. She never expected respect. Not from patients who heard Dr. Harris and imagined a silver-haired man with a Yale tie. Not from families who asked if she was the nurse. Not from security guards who still asked for ID, even though her face hung on the top physician's poster in the lobby. But she didn't come for respect. She came for answers, for treatment, for truth. And in room 214, she was about to offer it for free, until the patient opened her mouth. "Are you the nurse?" "No," Simone said simply. "I'm the doctor." The woman squinted, her voice dry but sharp. "You sure?" Simone didn't flinch. She read the chart. Adjusted the 4 drip. Then came the line, "I'd prefer someone more qualified. You look awfully young." And I don't know. There's just a lot of mistakes these days with foreign doctors. Simone paused. She wasn't foreign. She was born in Maryland, grew up 3 blocks from where Frederick Douglass once walked. But she didn't correct the woman, didn't defend her degree. She simply nodded and said, "I'll step out," then walked out. At the nurse's station, the resident on duty, Jacob, fresh-faced, earnest, looked up. "You okay?" Simone handed him the chart. "She refused me. Assign someone else." He blinked. "But you're the attending on call." "She doesn't want me. Let her learn the long way." He hesitated. "You sure?" Simone nodded once. "I'll be here. When they circle back, I'll still be here." Then she walked away, calm, unshaken, but aware. 3 hours later, the first attending misdiagnosed it as strep-induced myocarditis. 4 antibiotics. No improvement. Another guess Lyme. Negative. Then came the CT scans. Shadows on the lungs. No clear origin, one doctor muttered. They called in pulmonology. He shrugged. Could be viral. Could be autoimmune. They pumped more meds. More guesses. Simone? She watched from the margins. Never smug. Never interfering. Just present. One nurse asked her, "Why don't you just jump in? Fix it." Simone looked at her. "Because I can't teach anything if I keep interrupting lessons people refuse to learn." By hour 12, the woman's oxygen levels dropped fast. Panic in the hallway. Stat orders flying. Confusion everywhere. Finally, someone said what no one wanted to say. "Get Harris." Simone entered the room the same way she always did. No anger. No vengeance. Just purpose. She checked the labs, cross-referenced with cases from 2 years ago, pulled a sample, ran a quick test herself because she didn't trust them to find it fast enough. She was right. A rare parasitic infection, spread through soil, misdiagnosed 87% of the time in the U.S. Most doctors had never seen it, but she had, twice. She ordered the correct meds, adjusted the dosage manually, then sat beside the patient's bed and waited. Not because she had to, because she chose to. By morning, the patient was stable, pulse steady, fever breaking, and when her eyes opened, foggy, confused, the first person she saw was Dr. Simone Harris. Simone didn't speak, didn't say, "I told you so," didn't remind her of anything. She just nodded and said, "You're safe now." The patient's lips parted, maybe to thank, maybe to apologize, but no words came. And for the first time since she entered that hospital, she didn't say anything. She just looked away, ashamed. Simone stood, walked out, and as she passed the nurse's station, one young med student stood straighter, watched her with a different look, not of pity, but of recognition. Because it was clear now, this wasn't a doctor they could break. This was the doctor who fixed what no one else even saw. Hospitals look the same at 3 a.m. as they do at 3 p.m., except for the silence. Simone Harris moved through the hallways with practiced ease. Her badge swung at her hip, scrubs neat, shoes practical, her steps soft but never hesitant. The first thing you notice about her isn't her voice or even her presence. It's how she moves through a place that doesn't want to slow down for anyone. Tonight, she had already solved 2 puzzles. One elderly man with fevers the ER wrote off as senility turned out to be an early lymphoma. One child nearly discharged as a flu case, instead diagnosed with Kawasaki and started on treatment in time. But victories didn't change the system. Not when the system was hundreds of small signals stacked on top of each other. Simone waited in line at the staff coffee station. 2 residents in front of her debated out loud if she was really board certified in ID or just one of those fast-track recruits. She said nothing. A nurse stepped aside so another doctor, white coat, white hair, could cut the line. He nodded at Simone, as if she was there to fetch coffee, not prescribe it. She didn't correct him. She let him take his cup. She paid for hers. Power, she'd learned, wasn't about correction. It was about restraint. Back in the physician lounge, the talk was all about the tough case in 214. Simone sat at the end of the table, reviewing labs, marking patterns in the CBC like a musician hearing notes in white noise. She heard the talk. You hear that lady in 214 asked for a different doctor? What is it with these patients lately? Some people just don't want to trust a face they don't expect. They said she looked her up and down and said, I want someone real. Unreal, man. A junior attending asked, Harris, you got time for another consult? She nodded. Page me. He smiled, relief obvious. But behind her, a different attending muttered, I hope she doesn't pull the race card on this one. That family's already high-strung. Simone finished her note, snapped her pen closed, and stood. Didn't raise her voice. Didn't dignify the comment with a reply. At rounds, she presented 3 cases to a panel of 7. Her diagnoses were direct, her plans logical. 6 heads nodded. 1 head, Dr. Kavanaugh, questioned every step. What was your source for that dosing protocol? Have you run that by the ID chief yet? Do you want to double-check before we chart it? Some of these rare cases can be tricky. Simone nodded, answered every question calmly, cited literature, even quoted page numbers. Kavanaugh still pushed. I'd like a second opinion before we make any changes. She smiled. By all means, just don't let the patient get sicker while you're asking. Later, Simone passed through the administrative wing, where protocol ruled everything. She paused at the file room, listened. A clerk inside muttered, She's good, but I wish they wouldn't make her the face of every PR push. Makes us look like we only hire for optics. Simone leaned in. Hi, Bob. He jumped, startled. She smiled, patient as ever. Just dropping off some case files. Don't let anyone say, I don't do my own paperwork. He blushed, mumbled an apology. She left, not looking back. She didn't need to. That afternoon, a new nurse started her shift. Young, excited, maybe a little naive. Her name was Allie. She met Simone in the medroom. Allie, Dr. Harris, I read your paper on viral co-infections. They made us study it at school. You really think we're missing things in the way we code diagnoses? Simone smiled, warmth clear for the first time that day. Absolutely. Codes are just shortcuts. People are the puzzle. Allie's eyes widened. You ever get tired of always being right? Simone laughed, soft and true. I get tired of proving it, never of being it. Just as she returned to her office, her phone buzzed. A text from the resident. 214's O2 dropping. Team wants a consult. Simone closed her laptop, straightened her coat, walked, calm, present, toward the battle. At the door, she paused, listened. Inside, a group of doctors argued. Push more fluids? Try another steroid? Is this even our lane? No one had a plan. Simone knocked once. Entered. 6 faces turned. She said, simply, You paged. They explained the crash, the missed markers, the panic. She reviewed the chart in silence. Then, quietly, draw a blood smear. Look for strongyloides. Stat. A hush. A blink. Kavanaugh, the skeptic, frowned. Are you sure? Simone. I'm positive. I've seen it before. It moves fast. We lose her, she's gone in hours. They hesitated. She met every gaze in the room. If I'm wrong, you lose time. If I'm right, you save her life. That's when the system moved, not because it believed her, but because it couldn't afford not to. She waited outside the room, arms crossed, staring at the linoleum, at the shoe prints that always went one way. In, not out. Allie, the new nurse, joined her. You think they'll give you credit? Simone shrugged. I'm not here for credit. I'm here so the next time a woman like me walks into this hospital, they remember not to get in her way. Inside, the smear came back positive. Rare parasite. Same as she'd seen in Lagos, in Queens, in Mississippi. Simone prepped the meds herself, set the drip, watched as the numbers stabilized, and, for a second, a tiny one, the system slowed down enough to let her work. But even in that, she knew. Tomorrow, it would start all over again. She walked out to the evening air, the sun already gone, streetlights flickering. and she thought, not with bitterness, but with resolve. You can run all the protocols you want. You can stack the deck against me. But as long as I keep showing up, this system's going to have to see me. She smiled, soft, unbroken, ready for the next day, because she knew power isn't the person at the top of the list. Power is the person who keeps coming back. No matter how many times the system tries to file her away, Simone had been called a lot of things in her life. Too direct, too calm, too much. She wore those phrases like scars, quiet reminders of the rooms she'd entered where her presence alone was treated like disruption. But nothing, not the stares in med school, not the refusals to pronounce her name right, not even the security guard who once asked if she was shadowing a real doctor, prepared her for what happened next. Because this time it wasn't about pride. It was about a patient's life. It started with a chart. She picked it up from the admin pile, just like any other. Patient 214, the same white woman who had refused her treatment days earlier, had relapsed. Vitals unstable. Slight fever again. New rash forming around the arms. Breathing shallow. Simone reviewed the notes. Something was off. Her treatment had worked. The parasite had been cleared. But now, new symptoms. And worse, the current team had pulled her off the case without notifying her. She flipped to the last order. New attending, Dr. Kavanaugh. She blinked. He wasn't infectious disease. He wasn't even internal med. He was pulmonology, brought in after Simone saved the woman's life, and now apparently listed as lead on her case. Simone walked to his office. Knocked once. Come in. He looked up, surprised. Dr. Harris. Everything all right? She held up the chart. You reassigned 214. Without consulting me. He leaned back. She's stable now. Didn't seem necessary to keep an ID specialist on. Simone narrowed her eyes. She's not stable. She's developing secondary symptoms. If this is strongyloides hyperinfection and you miss it, she dies. Fast. He shrugged. I ran labs. Nothing conclusive. Looked like an allergic reaction. Simone stepped closer. She's immunocompromised. If you push steroids like the last order suggests, you'll kill her. Now he looked annoyed. I've treated my share of pulmonary complications. She's not pulmonary. Neither is this your department anymore. That's when Simone realized this wasn't medical disagreement. This was erasure. She turned to leave. Didn't speak. She walked straight to the pharmacy. Checked the logs. Found the most recent order. Prednisone, 60 milligrams oral daily. She stared at it like it was a loaded gun pointed the wrong way. Because if this drug went through and the woman still had traces of the parasite, it would multiply under immunosuppression, attack her lungs, her brain, shut her down in hours. Simone stormed to the pharmacist on duty. Hold this. The pharmacist blinked. Dr. Harris? Prednisone for 214. Cancel the fill. I can't without the attendings. Override. You just got it. I'm sorry, it's not your case. Simone pulled out her phone. Dialed. A beat. Dr. Nugent, she said. The chief of medicine. Within 5 minutes, she was in his office. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't throw credentials. Just laid out the chart. The labs. The risk. And said flatly, you're going to want to reverse that prescription before it becomes a lawsuit. Dr. Nugent reviewed the data. Didn't argue. He called pharmacy. Canceled the dose. And put Simone back on the case. By the time she returned to room 214, the woman was asleep. For drip still running. Heart rate better. No meds administered. Crisis averted, barely. Simone stood by the bed. Stared down at the patient who once refused her help. Who said she didn't want a diversity case. Who had asked for someone qualified. And now, that woman had no idea her life had almost been ended by someone who didn't see her fully again. Simone adjusted the blanket on her arm. Turned to the nurse in the corner. Make sure her labs are drawn every 6. And flag me if anything shifts. She's still not out of danger. The nurse nodded. Simone turned to leave. But at the door she stopped. Said quietly, they keep making the same mistake. The nurse blinked. Who? Simone didn't turn around. The ones who think their judgment is sharper than science. Who think titles matter more than track records. Who think I'm here to prove something. A pause. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here to prevent the next death that could have been avoided, if someone had just listened. And with that, she walked out. Not shaking. Not broken. Just done playing nice. Because a line had been crossed. And this time, she wasn't stepping back. She was stepping through. 2 days passed. Room 214 stabilized. The patient, Margaret Langford, was now breathing on her own. No longer febrile. Appetite returning. Conscious, but not speaking much. Her vitals climbed steadily, quietly, just like Simone's presence. Only now, people were watching her differently. They didn't say it out loud, but the shift was there. The way the cardiologist paused to let her speak first in rounds. The way the senior nurse now asked her to double-check other doctors' notes. Even the security guard at the parking entrance, the same one who once waved everyone else through, but always asked for Simone's ID, now opened the gate the moment he saw her headlights. It wasn't because she had changed. It was because they had learned who she really was. It started with an email, sent quietly, from Chief of Medicine, TO all attending staff. Subject, Department Realignment. Inside, one line. Effective immediately, Dr. Simone Harris will assume the role of Interim Director of Infectious Disease. One line, but it detonated like a silent bomb. Because up until now, many had assumed Simone was just a mid-level ID specialist, not the woman handpicked by the board to succeed the retiring department chair, not the only doctor in the state licensed for a new CDC experimental treatment program, not the person already scheduled to testify before Congress about parasite misdiagnosis in rural care. Now, they all knew. At the next all-staff huddle, she didn't walk in late or wait at the edge like usual. She walked in first, clipboard in hand, white coat crisp, ID badge upgraded, now laminated gold. She stood at the center, looked around, and said, "Before we begin, I want to clear one thing up. I didn't get this role because of optics, or quotas, or a moment in the media cycle. I got it because I show up when it matters, and when it's quiet." A silence settled. If you've ever dismissed someone based on appearance, this is your moment to self-correct. Because from now on, we don't treat perception. We treat people. And the first person I'm holding accountable is myself. Someone in the back clapped. Another followed. And soon, the room was filled with applause. But Simone didn't smile. Not yet. Because praise isn't proof. Practice is. Later that afternoon, Dr. Kavanaugh approached her office. He knocked. Waited. She looked up. "Come." "Yes." He cleared his throat. "I came to apologize for dismissing you, for pulling you off the Langford case. I should have consulted you, trusted your expertise. I was wrong." Simone studied him, then gestured toward a chair. He sat. She slid a folder across the desk. "This is your new review packet. You lead the ID sensitivity curriculum starting next week. Not because it's punishment, because you clearly need to learn how to listen and then teach others how." He nodded slowly, not offended, grateful, because in her office, grace was never weakness, but it was earned. Across the hospital, the memo moved faster than rumor. Not just about Simone's promotion, but about the why. Because behind the scenes, administrators were also scrambling to adjust old PR strategies, to revise outdated charts, to scrub out years of protocol that left patients like Margaret Langford at the mercy of guesswork. Simone didn't demand it. She became it. The change, the check, the voice in the system that no longer whispered. That evening, Margaret, the patient, asked for Simone. Not loudly, just once, just quietly. "Can I see the black doctor again? The one I turned away." Simone entered the room, stood at the foot of the bed. Margaret looked up, voice cracked but clear. "I remember what I said. I don't deserve you here." Simone didn't move, didn't blink, just said, "You didn't have to deserve me. You just had to survive long enough to see me." Margaret's eyes welled up. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Simone walked to her chart, made a few adjustments. No more steroids, she said. You're not built for them. Margaret tried to speak again. Failed. Simone stepped toward the door. Then paused. I don't need your apology. But I do need you to tell the next black doctor that you trust her, even if she doesn't look like what you expect. She walked out, not as an act of forgiveness, as a statement of return. Because the door Margaret once tried to close, Simone had walked straight through it. And now, that door would never close the same way again. The hallway was too quiet for 3 p.m. Simone knew that kind of silence. It wasn't peace. It was hesitation. Whispers had stopped. Screens had gone dark the second she stepped in. She walked past the nurse's station, past the coffee machines, and toward the end of the administrative wing, to the office with a brass nameplate that hadn't yet been taken down. Dr. A. Kavanaugh, attending physician, pulmonary. She didn't knock. She opened the door and stepped inside. Kavanaugh looked up from his laptop, startled, but trying not to show it. Dr. Harris. He stood. Simone didn't offer a handshake. She stayed standing too. Sit, she said. He did. The authority in her voice wasn't loud. It was final. She placed a folder on the desk. Not thick, just 2 pages inside. You want to read that? Kavanaugh opened it. Page 1. The retraction form for the prescription he had written for patient 214, the steroid that would have killed her. Page 2. A formal note of evaluation from the Ethics Review Committee citing negligence through procedural override and failure to defer to specialist consultation despite risk. He read in silence, then looked up. I already apologized. Simone folded her arms. I'm not here for an apology. He shifted in his seat. I didn't know the full picture. No, you refused to look at it. She stepped closer. You weren't just wrong. You were reckless. You erased me from a case you weren't qualified to handle because you didn't want to feel outranked by a black woman. He opened his mouth, closed it. She went on. Do you know what would have happened if that dose went through? If I hadn't intercepted that prescription? He didn't answer. Simone didn't let the silence breathe. She would have died. That's not theory. That's precedent. That's data. She placed another paper on the desk, a copy of her own published case study from 2020, strongyloides hyperinfection syndrome, following immunosuppressive treatment in an unscreened host. She tapped the top corner. Read the patient name. Read the date. Read the exact dosage you prescribed. Kavanaugh blinked. It matched. Exactly. I'm not here to ruin your career, she said. I'm here to ask why it took a near death and a promotion for you to listen. He swallowed. I trusted my gut. I've seen 1,000 pulmonary cases. I thought. Your thought was louder than my experience. That's the problem. She leaned in. I didn't ask for your respect. I earned it, and you tried to erase it. He stared down at the floor. I made a mistake. No, she said steady. You made a choice. A long beat passed. She paced once slowly, then stopped. Now here's my choice. She held up a single pen, set it down next to the forms. You can sign this review acknowledgement and take a 30-day training track. Shadow me for 2 weeks. Start your recertification on infectious comorbidity cases. She paused. Or what? Or I let the board handle it. Kavanaugh stared at the pen, hands still, breathing uneven. You want me to follow you? Simone raised an eyebrow. I want you to learn. He stared a second longer, then picked up the pen. Signed. She nodded once. Report to me Monday. No exceptions. No ego. He stood, tried to meet her eyes. Why are you giving me this chance? Simone turned to the door. Because the patient survived, and because the next one might not unless you change. She opened the door and added, but don't mistake this for kindness. This is accountability, quiet, daily, and earned. And with that, she left. Outside, she walked past 2 interns whispering by the elevator. One looked nervous. The other looked inspired. They weren't talking about Kavanaugh. They were talking about her. You think she really saved that woman? She did. And then she trained the guy who almost killed her. Simone didn't stop. She didn't smile, But her steps? They were lighter. Because justice, for her, didn't come in a speech. It came in a hallway, in a folder, in a fact no one could delete, and in a man, once too proud to listen, now standing in her shadow learning how. It didn't go viral. Not at first. There was no camera when Simone Harris saved the patient who called her unqualified. No film crew when she stood in front of Dr. Kavanaugh and gave him a choice, learn or leave. But someone saw, and someone talked, and then someone else listened. It started with a note. Not to Simone, to the hospital suggestion box. One of those plastic wall units nobody touched. Dusty, forgotten, never emptied. Someone slid in a folded napkin. Crinkled. Blue ink. It read, "She saved my mother when no one else even looked twice. You call her overqualified? We call her the reason we're not planning a funeral." No name, just a room number. Within 24 hours, the box overflowed. The chief of staff ordered an internal review. Not disciplinary, observational. He wanted to know how many patient requests were ignored, how many gut decisions overruled protocol, how many black women in medicine had left quietly in the last 5 years. The numbers weren't bad. They were typical, and that made them worse. Then came the stories. Not in press. In the halls. A med student, Asian American second year, told her cohort how she was told by a senior doc, "You're too shy for trauma. Pediatrics might be more your culture." A janitor shared that a previous director once told him not to speak Spanish in front of families. It might make people nervous. A trans nurse said she was told to use the staff entrance so no one got confused about uniforms. No one shouted. No one marched. They just spoke. And the system started to creak. Simone didn't lead these sessions. She didn't host town halls. She just showed up, sat at the back, listened, took notes, and when it was time, she stood and said, "We can't heal people while pretending our halls are neutral. Bias doesn't need hate to exist. It only needs comfort, and silence is the softest pillow for it to sleep on." She closed her notebook and walked out. Because what she had to say had already landed. Meanwhile, Allie, the new nurse, started asking questions. Not big ones, just real ones. To patients, "Have you felt dismissed today?" To staff, "Do you think your idea would have been heard if you looked different?" At first, people laughed. Then they answered. One patient, middle-aged, white, whispered, "I watched how they looked at you when you took my vitals, and I realized I used to look at nurses like that, too." Allie wrote it down, pinned it on the board. Above it, a new sign. "Say it here, so we don't forget it out there." A young resident named Omar emailed Simone late one night. Subject, "What you made possible." He wrote, "I used to think the best I could hope for was to blend in, but then you spoke in that hallway. You made it impossible for me to pretend I was just lucky. I'm not lucky. I'm qualified. And it's time I acted like it." She replied with one sentence. "Say it louder, not for them, for you." Across the city, whispers reached med school lecture halls. A class of third-year students wrote a letter to the administration asking why there were no core lectures on racial disparities in diagnosis rates. They quoted Simone, word for word, "We don't treat perception. We treat people." The quote was added to the next semester's opening slide, not with her name, just labeled, from a physician who saw what others didn't. Simone saw the screenshot, saved it, didn't repost it, just looked at it once, and closed her phone. Then came the unlikeliest ripple. Margaret Langford's son, the patient's only family member, returned to the hospital with flowers. He found Simone in the hallway. She was reading a chart, didn't look up. "Dr. Harris?" She turned. I came to thank you. For my mother. And also..." He paused, swallowed. "She told me what she said to you. The thing she assumed. She's not proud." Simone listened. He shifted. "I was raised the same way. I didn't even realize how much I carry that." He handed her a sealed envelope. "I don't expect you to read it, but she wrote this for you." Simone accepted it, didn't open it, just nodded. If she meant it, she'll say it again. To the next doctor she doesn't expect. He blinked, then smiled. and walked away. Later that week, Dr. Kavanaugh submitted a proposal, voluntarily, Institutional Bias in Diagnosis, a curriculum for internal medicine. First line, this work was made necessary by a mistake I made, one that nearly cost a life, one that was prevented by someone I didn't listen to, that ends now. The proposal was accepted. Simone was listed as co-author. She didn't add a bio. She didn't want one. The hospital cafe started putting up language cards. Tell us what you speak. We'll match you with someone who hears you. A new badge option was created. Pronouns, __/___. The old security guard, who once ID'd Simone every morning, now he stood when she passed, not out of fear, out of knowing. And somewhere in an empty lecture room, a young black girl, shadowing a nurse for the summer, sat alone at a desk, scrolling through hospital bios. She stopped at one. Dr. Simone Harris, MD, PhD, Director of Infectious Disease, Lyons General Hospital. The girl smiled, whispered to herself, "She looks like me." And that was the loudest silence broken yet. The hallway lights buzzed quietly as Simone unlocked the door to conference room 6C. No one else was there yet. She liked it that way. No eyes, no questions. Just a moment to sit in a room where, for years, people like her weren't invited except to pour coffee or clean up after meetings. Now, she had the master key, but she wasn't here to flex it. She was here to use it. On the table lay 4 folders, each one marked Policy Revisions, Medical Bias Protocol, Resident Training Audit, 3-year Review, Complaint Pathways, Rewriting Chain of Reporting, Community Trust Repair, Post-Incident Recommendations. She flipped each open, one by one. Every section wasn't about punishment. It was about repair. The first document she signed was, for HR, any patient who refuses care based on race, gender, or language proficiency shall be documented and reviewed. Not to blacklist, but to track patterns. Not to retaliate, but to acknowledge. She paused after signing it, because for a long time, those moments went unnoticed, unfiled, forgotten in rooms without video. Not anymore. The second form wasn't about patients. It was about peers. When a staff member overrides a specialist based on assumption, not data, that's not a difference in approach. That's a system failure. She didn't name names. Not Kavanaugh. Not anyone else. Because this wasn't about ego. It was about infrastructure. Like checking a foundation for cracks. Not to shame the builder, but to stop the house from collapsing on the next family. She signed again. Clean. Quiet. Deliberate. She looked up at the empty chairs. Imagined the boardroom, full of faces that had once talked around her instead of her. They had always loved her results, just not her presence. Too composed, too clear, too unbothered, too much like someone they couldn't control. Now they had no choice but to trust her. And ironically, that's when she became trustworthy to herself. Knock. Then the door opened. Janine, the nurse from the feedback committee, stepped in with a folder of staff suggestions. Simone. Yeah. Security says the new feedback terminal's already at capacity. 3 days and it's full. No anonymous names either. People are signing their words. Simone exhaled. That's the real progress. Janine handed her the folder. Just so, you know, half of these thank you. Directly. Simone placed it on the table. I'll read them. All of them. But after the policies are locked in. Janine nodded. You're serious about not making this about you. I've spent 20 years being the exception. Now, I want to be the reason others don't have to be. Janine left, but not before she smiled. Not politely, proudly. That afternoon, Simone walked into the hospital's oldest wing. A corridor still lined with faded plaques of founders, all men, all white, all dead. She didn't tear them down. She just passed them, walked into the records office, and sat across from Miguel, a third-year resident, first-generation med student. He looked nervous. Dr. Harris, I heard you wanted to meet. She nodded. You submitted the proposal about removing GPA filters from residency shortlist, right? Yes, ma'am. She held it up. You're right. Those filters don't measure resilience. They measure privilege. His eyes widened. So you'll back it? I'll push it. He blinked. You will? Simone leaned forward. You think this chair means I care what makes the rankings look good? He smiled almost shyly. I think it means we've got a shot at changing what qualified looks like. She handed him the signed approval. Start writing the framework. Deadline's in 2 weeks. Miguel stood, stunned. As he left, he whispered, I used to think justice was a protest. Now I know it's also a pen. Simone said nothing, but her hands rested lightly on the folder. Because that line, it was hers now, too. Back in her office, she made one final call. To the board chair. Not to gloat. To clear the runway. By end of month, I'm reallocating discretionary funding, she said. Training, mentorship, and early intervention tracking. The board member asked, won't that cut into your own department's budget? Simone, yes. Are you okay with that? She smiled. Justice costs something. If it doesn't, it's just PR. The line went quiet, then approved. Before leaving that night, Simone returned to room 214. Margaret was awake, sitting upright. She looked different, not because she was healthier, because she saw Simone now, really saw her. I don't expect a second chance, she said quietly. Simone stepped inside. You're not getting one. Margaret blinked, ashamed. Simone continued. You're getting clarity. That's all. And that's enough. She checked the vitals, adjusted the line, then turned to leave. At the door, Margaret said, I told my son, the next time I see a black doctor, I'll say thank you before I ask her name. Simone nodded once. You'll be okay. And left. She didn't cry. She didn't post it. She didn't write a memoir. She just went home, removed her coat, and folded it carefully. Not because it was sacred, but because it meant something now. A symbol not of arrival, but action. Not just presence, but impact. She made dinner, called her sister, reviewed a student's research proposal, and before bed, she took out one slip of paper from her drawer, the first feedback note she ever got at the hospital. It read, quiet, smart, may lack leadership potential. She smiled, folded it in half, wrote 3 words on the back, may, no longer. Then closed the drawer, and turned off the light. The first ripple didn't come from the boardroom. It came from the stairwell. An intern named Tara, second week in rotation, stopped Simone after rounds. Dr. Harris? I wanted to say, I saw the way you handle that consult with Dr. Chun. Simone blinked, waiting. You didn't interrupt. You didn't push. But you waited and then asked the right question. And suddenly the whole plan shifted. Simone smiled faintly. That's what medicine is. Tara shook her head. No, that's what leadership is. Simone nodded once and walked away. Not because it wasn't meaningful, because it didn't need performance to be real. Elsewhere in the hospital, small shifts turned into patterns. Patient intake forms were rewritten with expanded gender markers. Interpreters were now auto-assigned based on patient preference, not when available. The staff cafeteria added prayer break slots to shift scheduling software. Not after someone asked, but before they had to. None of this made headlines, but inside the hospital, it made space. At a nearby medical school, a professor changed her syllabus. She replaced the ethics in bias PowerPoint with a new module. When the system shifts, case study, Dr. Simone Harris, Lions General. One student raised their hand. Is she some kind of activist? The professor shook her head. No, she's just someone who didn't leave. The ripple spread beyond medicine. A former patient's daughter, a journalism major, published a first-person essay online. My mother said a black doctor couldn't save her. She did anyway. It didn't go viral overnight, but it circulated. Faculty shared it. Nurses forwarded it. Grad students cited it. The last line read, Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like a woman who walks in calm, lets you underestimate her, and still saves your life. Simone didn't repost it, but she read it, twice, then closed the browser and went back to charting labs. Because work is what she's always trusted most. Meanwhile, the medical board sent an unexpected email. Subject: Proposal, statewide mentorship pilot. The program would pair underrepresented med students with senior physicians of shared identity and background. They asked if Simone would lead the advisory panel. Her response? Only if the panel includes nurses, residents, and one janitor. If you want equity, start with everyone in the room. They said yes, because at that point, who would tell her no? Back at Lyons General, an old file resurfaced. An HR report from 4 years ago, buried. A black nurse had filed a complaint against a doctor who refused to enter the room of a non-English-speaking patient unless an English-only nurse was present. The complaint was dismissed. Now, Simone quietly reopened it, re-reviewed testimony, found the nurse, still employed, still quiet. She asked for a meeting. The nurse, mid-50s cautious, said, "Why now?" Simone answered, "Because someone should have listened then. And now that someone has power, I'm listening now." In the hospital's public-facing display, new portraits went up, photos of key staff, meant to humanize the front lines. The old ones? White coats, posed smiles, mostly white, mostly male. The new wall? An ICU nurse with a hijab, cradling her toddler. A receptionist who once slept in her car, now lead on patient satisfaction. Miguel, the resident who once feared speaking up, now holding his own whiteboard that reads, "Qualified, not quiet." And in the center, a photo of Simone, not in a lab, not behind a podium. Just her, sitting on a bench outside, stethoscope in one hand, tablet in the other, sunlight on her braid bun. Captioned simply, "She stayed, and changed everything quietly." Simone didn't know the photo had been taken. She saw it the next morning, paused, exhaled, didn't remove it, but walked on. Then came the next level. Other hospitals reached out. A pediatric center in Baltimore, a trauma unit in Chicago, a university clinic in Oakland. They didn't ask for a training or a talk. They asked, "How did you build a culture that tells the truth and survives it?" Simone didn't prepare a slide deck. She sent back a 3-sentence reply. Start by asking your quietest employee what they see. Believe them. Then make sure the loudest one sits down long enough to listen. That was the framework. And it worked. Months later, an NPR segment aired, Healing Power. How one doctor rewrote what respect looks like in a hospital. Simone was mentioned briefly. The reporter tried to get a quote from her. She declined. They asked again. She sent one line. "Justice isn't the moment we clap. It's the day we realize we no longer need to." The quote closed the segment, and the host, silent for a beat, just said, "Let that sit with you." That weekend, Simone took a rare day off, went to visit her niece, age 10, who had started saying she wanted to be a doctor or a poet, or both. They walked through a bookstore. The girl asked, "Do people ever say doctors don't look like you?" Simone didn't lie. They used to. The girl looked up. "And now?" Simone paused, then said, "Now, they look at me and remember someone they want to become." Her niece grinned, and in that moment, that smile, that was the sound of reverberation. Not loud, but lasting. The first person who came to her didn't knock. He waited until she was walking down the hallway between radiology and pathology, one of those quiet corridors where no one talks unless something's wrong. Dr. Langford. Yes, that Langford. The son of the woman who once refused Simone's care. He wore no suit this time. No tie. Just hospital visitor clothes and a face that looked older than it had 3 months ago. "Dr. Harris," he said softly. She didn't slow down. He matched her pace. "I know you don't owe me a minute, but I'd like to say something." Simone stopped. Just enough. He took a breath. "My mother doesn't remember much about the night. She almost died. But I do. I remember watching her talk down to you like she knew better. And I remember watching you walk away with more grace than I had sitting beside her." Simone stayed silent. He went on. "What you did, not just saving her, but staying through it, it made me realize I've done the same thing. Not to you, but to others. Nurses I didn't make eye contact with. Techs I assumed didn't know their job. And I've been sitting with that. He reached into his pocket, held out a folded letter. My mother wrote this. I didn't want to send it. I wanted to say it, so you could throw out if you needed to. Simone took it, didn't open it, just nodded once. You're not responsible for what you believed, she said. He blinked. I'm not. No, Simone said, but you are responsible for what you keep believing. And she walked on. Later that day, she received another visit. This time, Dr. Kavanaugh. No tie, no clipboard, just him. On time. Scheduled. He sat across from her in her office and placed a folder on her desk. It wasn't a report. It was a reflective memo. Title, What I Failed to See. He didn't read it aloud. He just sat there, hands folded. I've spent my whole career thinking precision was enough, he said. I thought that if I got the diagnosis, nothing else mattered. He met her eyes. But you were right. I didn't miss the infection. I missed you. And by doing that, I almost killed someone. Simone said nothing. He added, I'm not asking for absolution. I wanted you to know I'm not going to forget that I sat in this chair and someone had to teach me what humility actually feels like. He stood, left the folder. She didn't thank him, but she kept it, filed it in a drawer labeled, not finished, but learning. 2 days later, an email arrived from someone she hadn't thought about in months. Allie, the young nurse who'd once asked if people would ever give Simone credit. Subject line, because of you, I spoke up. The message read, I saw a nurse get disrespected yesterday. A patient said she looked too masculine to be caring for children. I almost walked away. I thought, that's not my fight. But then I thought of how you stayed in the room. So I stepped in. I said, she's your nurse. And if you don't want to respect her, you can discharge yourself. The patient backed off. The nurse cried in the elevator later. And I realized, you didn't just make it okay to speak. You made it impossible not to. Simone replied, every time someone speaks like that, the room gets bigger. Stay loud. Then came something even rarer. A visit from the hospital's oldest attending, Dr. Ralston. He'd trained here since before Simone was born. He'd never disrespected her, but he'd never advocated for her either. Neutral, respectful, safe. He showed up one afternoon with a cup of coffee and a folded piece of paper. I figured I owe you something. Simone didn't invite him in, but he sat anyway. He placed the paper on the desk, an old chart from Simone's first month at the hospital, almost 8 years ago. She remembered it. A complicated ID case she had correctly diagnosed, but that had been overridden by an older physician. Ralston had signed off on the override. I remember this, she said. So do I, he replied. I didn't say anything then. I knew you were right, but it was easier to let it go through the chain, easier to protect peace than truth. Simone looked at him. You think about it often? Too often. She stared at the paper, then said, do you still sign off on silence? He shook his head. I learned from someone who finally stopped letting me. He stood, and I hope someday I can say the same about someone else who learned from me. She didn't respond. Didn't need to. He left the paper. She filed it, not in her drawer, in the hospital's teaching casebook, under a new label. Corrected in hindsight, still worth studying. The most unexpected reckoning came not in person, but through action. A new intern had arrived on her team. Black, queer, quiet, barely 2 weeks into rotation, and already avoiding eye contact. Simone noticed. One day, she pulled him aside. Everything okay? They hesitated, then finally said, I'm afraid to speak up. Every time I do, it feels like people stop hearing me. Simone nodded. Keep speaking anyway. They looked at her confused. Why? She said, because someone is watching you, the way you're watching me, and they'll only speak tomorrow, if you don't give up today. By the end of the week, a new quote went up in the staff break room. Not printed, handwritten, taped under the clock. It read, we don't always get justice in the moment, but if we don't keep showing up, No one else gets it later. No name signed, but everyone knew. And this time, no one stayed silent. The storage closet hadn't changed much. Same door, same dull beige paint, same flickering hallway light outside it. But this time, Simone wasn't walking past it. She was unlocking it. Not because someone had been mistreated again, but because she needed to see it one last time. Inside, the air was cold. The shelves were clean now, labeled, organized, no longer used as a holding space for people who didn't belong. Simone stepped in, stood still, let the silence settle. No children clinging to her coat, no chart in her hand, just her, and the echo of what once was a turning point. She ran her fingers along the shelf where Margaret Langford had nearly spent her final hours under the wrong medication. And then, slowly, she knelt down. From her pocket, she pulled a small frame. Inside it, a typed card. This room once held assumptions. Now it holds accountability. She mounted it to the inner door. No plaque, no ceremony, just there. She stepped back, looked at it, then left, without a word. Outside, the hospital was alive with its own rhythm. The break room had a new whiteboard that said, "Shout out someone who made the day better." 3 nurses had written Dr. H. No one erased it. The new intern's orientation included a workshop titled, "How Bias Shapes Diagnosis." The first case study? Her patient. No name given, just the facts. And the lesson. Upstairs, in her office, Simone packed the last few things from her drawer. Not because she was leaving the hospital, because she was starting something outside of it. A new training program, regional, multi-hospital, community-informed. She wasn't taking a break. She was multiplying. Her office light stayed off as she locked the door. Just before she stepped away, she left one thing behind. A sealed envelope, labeled, "For the one who comes next." Inside, not instructions, just a sentence. "You do not need to mimic me. You need to outgrow what tried to shrink you." On the main floor, she passed a new young doctor, nervous, brown-skinned, fumbling with her badge. Simone stopped, helped her attach it straight. "First day?" The doctor nodded. "Internal med," she added shyly. Simone offered her a small smile. "You'll be fine." Then, almost as an afterthought, "Just remember, even when they don't say your name right, what matters is that you know how to spell it." The young doctor stared at her, eyes wide. "You're Dr. Harris, aren't you?" Simone nodded once. "I was." She smiled. "Now, I'm just Simone again." In the lobby, a child sat on the floor with a sketchbook. She had drawn a woman in a white coat, braids in a bun, standing over a hospital bed. Below it, in blocky pink letters, "Dr. Hero." Simone didn't see it. She didn't need to, because legacy isn't always what we hold. It's what others carry after we're gone. She stepped out into the evening light. No press waiting, no speeches, just one final exhale, the kind that lets the chest fall into itself like a sigh of release. No more proving, no more waiting for someone to believe her, because now, belief had nothing to do with it. Later that week, the janitor on the night shift entered the break room and saw someone had left a folded paper on the table. He opened it. Inside, a quote, handwritten. They tried to erase the presence. Instead, it became the proof that wouldn't go away. He read it again, then pinned it to the board. Didn't sign it. Didn't need to, because everyone already knew who it belonged to. And more importantly, what it meant.